All right, guys. So today we'll be talking about Legacy by James Kerr. And I've been looking to make this video series for a while now. And this is my most recommended book for anyone that's looking to learn about how to do team building in any competitive context. This is the case study on culture in team sports. And the All Blacks, the New Zealand All Blacks, are the most winning team in sports history. And this book does a great job at dissecting all of the things that makes them successful through the vector of their team culture. Now, the first thing I have to do is provide a definition, because the first chapter is called Character, Sweep the Sheds. So we have to define character, because I could probably say to you, hey, do you know what good character is? Do you know what character is? And you'd be like, yeah. But if I ask you to define it specifically, I think it's one of those words where it's like, yeah, I know what it is, but it's like a bit harder to sometimes kind of define it in a way that is let's say, clean, for lack of a better word. So character is essentially the end result of two things in combination. And those two things are values, number one, and two, principles. So values are the things that you as a person find important. So maybe that is work ethic or kindness, being kind to others. So these could be, some values that have been maybe passed down to you, impressed upon you from your parents or your caregivers, or it could be something that you saw in somebody else. And when you're like, wow, that guy, I'm really inspired by like how hard that guy works. Like there's something just amazing about that. And I really love that quality that person has. And now your brain is like, wow, that's valuable, and that's why you have that reaction, because you're like, whoa, that's cool, that's impressive, that's valuable, and maybe you want to have it too. So it's not enough to just have a value. You have to live by your values. If you live by your values, you'll be happiest. And most people, I'm sure you've experienced this, if you don't live by your values, you will not be happy, because you're then creating like a dissonant reality. And that dissonance is, I value this thing, but I'm not doing that thing, right? I value the hard work, but I'm not doing the hard work. So I feel like a piece of shit. That's the natural outcome to this. And we all go through this. We all go through situations where we're really disappointed with ourselves because we gave in to, being tired or just not feeling it for various reasons. And, we all have to kind of work through that and kind of learn about ourselves to understand how we can better uphold our values. And so that's what principles are. Principles are how you uphold your values. That is really the most important aspect of what that means. It's like the methods or the rules that you use to honor the values. So a principle for the work ethic is just working hard when you don't want to. It's really, the virtue there is discipline, because you're disciplined enough to be able to say fuck off to your emotions in that moment and say, no, I'm not gonna go and have a beer with my mates. I'm not gonna go and just go to bed or something or play a video game. No, I'm going to do this thing because I am listening to myself and I know that I need to keep working on this thing right now. And if I don't do it, I won't feel good. And the reason why you won't feel good again is because you are not upholding your values. So principles are the methods and rules in which you use to follow and honor your values. So by the following of the values, this is what over time through repetition builds character. So character is this outcome of that consistency, of consistently living according to your principles and your values. So when it comes to team culture, let's define culture very quickly as well. So culture is really just the agreed upon expectations, values, standards that a team might hold in this context. So there's a framework there that exists of acceptable actions and the code of conduct, the operational standards. These are all really what culture kind of comes down to if you boil it down. And so it is then upon the leadership of the team, and this is, by the way, always the case, the leadership in any context drives the culture. The leadership tells you what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And by the way, this is a very important point to impress upon everybody, in my opinion, because I see a lot of problems in companies, a lot of problems in teams. It is the leadership that are always responsible, because the buck stops with the leadership. They set the standards. If you have people in your company, if you have people on your team that are not adhering to the standards, that's on you. If you, as the leadership, do not abide to the standards that the team holds, you're giving permission to everybody else. You're completely fucking the whole thing. You are fucking the whole thing. And I have to say, whenever I see this kind of behavior from leadership, where I'm like, oh my God, they're expecting other people to adhere to certain values and they themselves are not doing it. That is like very tilting, because that is a clear sign that the culture is just doomed, basically. If the leaders don't have enough discipline or self-control or whatever it is to act in a way befitting of leadership. So again, one of the reasons, by the way, why I like discussing all of these dynamics with teams in a sports or esports environment is because it's really highly meritocratic, and it's all about maximizing or like min-maxing for winning. And so because of that, it becomes really simple. It allows you to remove a lot of noise, and it allows you to look at things, I think, in a more simple way that's quite elegant. So with that said, we've discussed, what character is. We've discussed what culture is, a set of agreed upon standards and expectations that a team has. So then, when we're looking at the sweep the sheds idea, this is effectively the way that the values are upheld. This is the principle that is being used by the New Zealand All Blacks. So the greatest fly half in rugby history is Dan Carter, and he had this to say about the sweep the sheds process. No one in New Zealand likes a big head. In the All Black environment, there's no room for it. And if there's ever signs of it happening, you'll soon be brought back down to earth. From the very start, you learn humility. There are these structures in place, like the fact that we always leave the changing room as clean as it was when we walked in. So you'll often see the likes of Richie McCaw and the coach Steve Hansen sweeping the shed. And so this is known as sweeping the sheds, and it's supposed to symbolize the humility and responsibility that every team member, regardless of their status, is expected to uphold. So it's supposed to be a powerful reminder that nobody is above the team. Like nobody's above the team. And that the success is built on a foundation of like hard work and respect. That's powerful. If you've got, because especially if you imagine it this way, you've got some of the most elite athletes. They are legitimate superstars in their own right, in celebrities. And it can be very easy for them to not be grounded at all, to have somebody else clean, have a janitor clean, or have their the young people on the team clean because they're the veterans. But no, think of how strong a communication of values it is for them to be the ones like executing that principle, because they are the ones that the younger players, the less experienced players will be looking up to, and they will be shaped by how these players are able to uphold the values. And then over time, through repeated execution of these principles, that then will confer to these virtues, these character qualities that are being built from these repeated habits and behaviors, until eventually you've got players that respect each other. They don't feel like they're too big to do any of the small things. And that's very important, by the way, because the small things are really easy to kind of cope your way past and say it's not important. But in reality, it's all important. But we try to disqualify that in our minds sometimes to give ourselves excuses. But, there's a powerful reminder that no one is above the team, and that success is built on this foundation of hard work and respect and humility. And so it's quite powerful when you think about it, really, because when we're talking about systems thinking is the act where we're looking at problem solving as like a holistic thing. And when we're doing systems thinking when it comes to culture in this particular regard, what's kind of cool is that what we're saying is, instead of using a linear thinking approach where the linear thinking would not be holistic, it would instead just say, we just want players to work harder. So we just outlined how Sweep the Sheds really emphasizes in the character this quality of hard work. Now, if you're in this linear thinking mode, you might just think, okay, I need to make my players work harder. So what I'm going to do is I am going to extend the work hours. I'm going to make the practice longer. I am going to offer incentives for like overtime. I am going to monitor the individual performance metrics like more strictly. So those actions might actually lead to a short-term benefit in productivity or performance, but it fails to consider like a lot of wider aspects, that so many things are connected, and looking at systems holistically and trying to understand how to build from that sense is way more impactful. And that's what this book is entirely about, by the way. So that those actions, let's say you did those things, you extended the work hours and the rest of the things that I mentioned, that could lead to like, more burnout. You're going to burn people out more. You're going to reduce, therefore, like the productivity in the long run. You're going to have like decreased satisfaction on the team and emotional damage costs as well. You're going to also be infringing upon the personal agency of the player, because by enforcing this extra thing, you're taking the agency away from the player who could have had the decision to do that or not. And that is, what does that communicate? That communicates that there are certain things you don't trust the player to make a decision on. And that can be okay in certain respects, but there are lots of others where it's not okay. And so this is actually quite damaging, in my opinion, to character, because what instead we want to be doing is we want to be doing the sweep the sheds. We want to be instead creating things that the team can do to uphold the values through certain actions or behaviors that we're encouraging in the team. And the beautiful thing about that we already talked about here with regards to how the older players are the senior players are the ones that do the sweeping of the sheds, is that they are training the younger players, because those younger players will eventually be the senior players too, when the senior players retire. So they will then take up the mantle, and then they will also kind of encourage people to do this behavior by just doing it. And one thing we'll get into in this book is called the dual management system. It recognizes that there are situations where the players will more effectively discipline each other than the coaching staff will discipline the players. So we'll get into that though. I've got to be really careful here that I don't dive into stuff before we're actually at that chapter. Okay, so just recapping a little bit, we talked about sweeping the sheds. We talked about how that is the way in which the team upholds the value, some of these values that the team has decided upon. And we've also talked about systems thinking and how this is a cool approach, in the sense that what we're doing is we're not guaranteeing, that the players will necessarily develop these types of character attributes by repeatedly doing this behavior, but it's very likely. And on top of that, because we're building character, the best part about this is the virtues that are gained or reinforced through these actions will then affect other things they do. So, for example, if this is about hard work, respect, and initiative, then those players will carry those behaviors through to other instances of things. So if you're wanting the player to work harder or to do lineups, well, if every player on the team is being sort of over time really reinforced to feel like they have personal responsibility over the team and the results of the team, even if they're not the coach, the assistant coach, the in-game leader, the head coach, the senior players on the team, even if it's the person that is the least, let's say, qualified per se, on the team to try to solve the problem, they're going to think, I want to look after the team, because again, let's go back to one of the ethoses that the All Blacks repeat all the time. Nobody looks after the All Blacks except the All Blacks. Now, this is a similar thing, like with this player. Imagine if the player thinks, okay, I need to look after the team. I have responsibility to do this. I should be taking the initiative on this, not because they think that nobody else is going to do it, but because they want to be someone that is executing and upholding a principle to look after the team. That's the value. And boom, 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 there we go. And the result is more work, because also they've got maybe a better work ethic, because that's the standard. That's the agreed upon cultural standard that's just sort of passively expected in the team. And this is another reason why the dual management model is important. We'll talk about it later. But all these players are operating under the same conditions and expectations. And so that's very powerful. So you actually, we get to these outcomes that I talked about that, the linear thinking approach might try to enforce, but instead of enforcing them, we've taken a much healthier approach where the behaviors and character traits we want are emergent from the system that we've created. And those players will be happier. Those character traits that have been developed will now be useful in other areas around the team as well. So there's all of these positive aspects. So I think this is a really good introduction to this book, because character, everything that's going on in the book, it's all about like building the best possible character for the players. Because one other thing that they say, and is repeated in the book a lot, is the ethos of better people make better All Blacks. So, and I think that's true of every athlete for anything, and esports as well. Like if you are someone that has, really strong sense of, hard work and humility and initiative and all of these various like qualities that we have seen, and we've got all this evidence helps to produce the highest performing athletes, well then, yeah, that's pretty dope. That's what we want to achieve. So there's so many things in the book that we're going to come across that are like this. And so similarly with systems thinking, all of the ways in which problems are solved is in this nature. And so that's why I've tried to set up this particular video by talking and explaining these concepts, because it's going to, I think, give us more of an ability to understand why some of this stuff works and how it can be implemented. So with that said, thank you very much for listening. Tell me what you think about this, because I've never, this is kind of like a book study type of situation, and I've never done anything like this on YouTube before. And this is very talking head type of content as well. So very curious what you guys think. I'm kind of making this video for more of a niche audience. My audience is already quite niche, but for those of you that are actually, because I know that there are people that watch some of my content that are in the position of like coaching or players on like, tier 1 teams or any professional type of team. So this is content that I think is obviously most relevant for those types of people. So I'm just throwing this out there for those people in particular. And if anybody else gets value out of it, I'd love to know. So with that said, thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.